now. And in a day or two, we will, if provided everything goes okay, we will put this on our website. So let me see. Well, why don't I go ahead? I'm going to go ahead and get started because I have a few things I want to say before we open it up for questions. So just good evening to everybody. I'm so glad you're all here. My name is Jill Drew, as you can see in my little Zoom square, and I am co-chair of the Sharon Connect Task Force, along with Megan Flanagan, who is also one of your little squares. And she and I are also jointly managing this Zoom call. If you have any issues with Zoom, you can put something in the chat, or you can actually, I'll give you my cell phone number, 202-525-8884, which maybe Megan can put in the chat if anyone wants to write that down, because oftentimes, you know, we don't have great internet in some places and people get knocked off calls and need some help. Our first selectman, Brent Colley, is also on the call, and we'll hear from him in a few minutes. Our task force, the Sharon Connect Task Force, has 12 members now, and I'm going to introduce everybody else at the end of the call. Most of us have been meeting about once a week since November of 2019 to work on options to present the town to provide universal access to high-speed internet for all of Sharon's homes and businesses. Our task is straightforward. We want to find out how much it would cost and how long it would take to wire all of Sharon for high-speed internet access, and also to lay out who could manage such a network, what services that network could offer, and how it could compete with our current providers, Comcast Xfinity, Frontier, HughesNet, and cellular Wi-Fi hotspots. We've made good progress on all of these fronts, but we don't have the final answers yet. And once we do, we will lay those all out, take all the questions that people have, and then if it feels right, we can go to a town meeting to see how the town feels what we want to do. This call today will be kind of an interim report on our part to let you know what we're doing. Also, we wanted to update you on many things that are going on, federal legislation, state legislation to support high-speed internet access, and as well as a new competitor that's entering our market. So, but before we get started on substance, I just want to go over a few Zoom housekeeping notes, and then Brent and I will offer some opening remarks, and then we're eager to get to your questions and hope we have a robust discussion. So first, to the Zoom housekeeping. If you're not speaking, and many of you have done this, go ahead and mute yourself. If you would like to ask a question, you can do one of many things. You can either use the raise hand function in your lower options where it tells you, if you go to participants, I think, and then you click on your name, there's a function to raise hand. You could also just type a question in the chat box. If you see chat down below, if you click on that, a little chat window will open and you can see the chat. And Megan or I will see that question and we'll respond. If you have your camera on, you can just simply raise your hand and we'll see you and call on you. And if you are dialing in by phone, you'll just, I guess, have to ask your question. I'll try to leave space in the question part. So some of you could just unmute yourself on your phone and ask your question. As I said, we're recording this call and we will post a video of it on our website and on our Facebook group so the others who were not here tonight can see it. So let me get into the substance of this call. This is our second community update. Our first was in December. The first thing I want to say is that we, as a task force, have been keeping in close contact with both Comcast Xfinity and Frontier to try to solve connectivity issues for their current customers in Sharon. and to be sure that we know what their plans are, if any, to improve their services to us. So if you have an issue with your current internet service and have not been making any headway with either Comcast or Frontier, please let us know. You can type into the chat window something for us we can follow up on, or you could email us. We have an email address, sharonctconnect@gmail.com. SharonConnect@gmail.com was already taken, so we have SharonCTConnect@gmail.com. And I just have to give a shout out to Megan, who is the main person who contacts Comcast and Frontier on many of our residents' behalf. And she has actually had success in getting real responses from them, and that often eludes me. Also, for those of you who have Comcast Xfinity, you should know that it has freed up some of the bandwidth that it had been using to provide pay-per-view television. And now it is able, you are able as a subscriber to subscribe to a higher tier of service, which can allow download speeds of as much as 1.2 gigabits. And those give you slightly higher upload speeds than their normal 20 to 25 megabits per second. This is good news for those who need speed, but it does make the divide even larger between those of us who live in neighborhoods that are wired for Comcast Xfinity and those that aren't. Meanwhile, our task force has begun preliminary conversations with a few internet network construction firms as we put together what's needed for an engineering plan that could help provide an accurate estimate of how much it would cost and how long it would take to build a high-speed internet network that would be owned by the town of Sharon. This kind of network would enable speeds of up to 1 gigabit download and upload. There would be, we haven't worked out all the details, of course, but we would manage it much like our Sewer and Water Commission does, in that the town would hire private companies to build and to operate any services over that network, and the town's commission would have oversight over that. The Sharon Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance have agreed to propose that the town allocate $30,000 in next year's budget to pay an engineering firm that would be chosen by competitive bid to produce an initial engineering plan. To keep the costs for that as low as possible, our task force has been working to gather as much data as we can about our current network infrastructure, and our members plan to work actively with whatever firm wins the competitive bid to assist and provide data that they might otherwise be charging us to produce. So the town will hold a public hearing on the proposed budget tomorrow night, April 30th at 7 p.m. It'll be an in-person meeting at the Sharon Center School Gymnasium, which has enough room to allow for social distancing. And you can also participate in that meeting over Zoom. There's details about that on the town website. If there are big disagreements about the budget surfaced at the meeting, the Board of Finance could decide to adjust the proposed budget before it goes to the final town vote. And that vote will be on Friday, May 14th, also at the Sharon Center School. I encourage everyone on this call to participate in both of those meetings. Broadband is just one small part of the budget meeting, but the budget is, a really important thing to be involved in. Our selectmen, Brent, Dale, and Casey have all been supportive of our task force's efforts. Brent facilitated an application for a $60,000 federal earmark through our Congresswoman, Johanna Hayes's office. If we win the allocation, which is not at all certain, we're competing with many other towns for these earmarks. But if we are successful, that money would go toward producing a more robust engineering plan, driving us closer to a shovel-ready project, and allow us to estimate how long the project could take to build, how much the monthly fee could be for our residents who subscribe to the service. This strategy of having the town put in some money and then applying for federal dollars under rural broadband funding options is kind of the overall strategy that we're pursuing here. There are other sources of federal funding that should be becoming available over the next several months, and we are in close touch with our state and federal elected officials about how we might qualify for some of that funding. Meanwhile, you may have heard that Sharon Hospital is embarking on a huge technology upgrade to support telehealth services, including getting reliable high-speed internet and cell phone service at the hospital. Our group plans to work collaboratively with the hospital, and we want to ensure that everyone in Sharon has sufficient high-speed internet to be able to participate in what the hospital is planning. An example of this could be, for example, like a chronically ill patient whose blood pressure and oxygen levels have to be monitored frequently. There would be opportunities for this patient to stay at home instead of being shuttled back and forth to the hospital, and have medical professionals there monitor their conditions over the internet. But that home would need sufficient internet speed to be able to upload that data about their vital signs, and the hospital medical staff could review that. On another note, there is a new kid in town to provide internet service. Elon Musk's satellite company, Starlink, promises to start offering service in Sharon by the end of this year. It's expensive, $499 to get the signal receiver and $99 a month for the service. The service is supposed to be much better than what HughesNet offers, but it's still a satellite, not a wired service. So it's unlikely to be as reliable as cable or fiber optic. To make it work, Starlink is launching thousands of satellites, which is causing congestion and interference issues with other satellites, and it might alter even what we can see when we look at the night sky. So it is not without controversy. But he is promising to provide high-speed internet for remote locations. We as a task force are not pushing this option, but if anyone wants to experiment with it, you can go to starlink.com to sign up. Meanwhile, on the legislative front, Governor Lamont is pushing the legislature to pass a broadband access bill. And as most of you know, broadband is a term that is often used interchangeably with high-speed internet. They both mean a network that has the bandwidth to handle large volumes of data at high speeds. So if the governor's broadband bill is passed in its current form, this legislation would require Comcast Xfinity to build out the rest of its network in Sharon along public town-owned and state-owned roads, and would require that Comcast do this at no cost to the town or any of its customers, no construction costs for anything in the public right-of-way. If you live on a private road or have a very long driveway, you'd still have to pay under this legislation all the construction and wiring costs from the road. Comcast generally covers the first 250 feet from the road to a premise, but after that, it's incumbent upon the homeowner or the private road, the people who live on that private road, to pay. If the town decides to build its own network, it would likely use fiber optic cables to the home rather than the coaxial cables that Comcast Xfinity uses. Fiber optic is capable of carrying data at much higher speeds, both uploading and downloading. And they use light energy, not electrical pulses, to carry information. So another aspect of the bill, regardless of whether it's Comcast Xfinity or the Town of Sharon building out its network, both will benefit from another key provision, something that's called One Touch Make Ready. That means that one company could be in charge of all the wiring needed on utility poles to provide internet access. And I've learned a lot about utility poles, things I didn't know before I joined this task force. But I know now that generally the electric wires are the ones that are at the very top of the poles. The landline phone wires are the ones that are at the closest to the ground. And then the wiring for the internet are as a wire in between. Some poles have transformers and other equipment on them. So if we were to, even if Comcast were going to wire a new network or the town was going to wire a new network, stringing a new wire on the pole now, well, it means you have to move what's there to make room for the new wire. And today, before you can attach a new wire on the pole, you have to go through the process that starts with whoever owns the pole. And the poles today are owned by both Frontier and Eversource. So you have to apply to both of them, plus whoever that internet service provider also has paperwork you have to do. So there's all kinds of paperwork and a lot of back and forth between Frontier and Eversource to get them to act on their pole attachment applications. And then there are also per pole payments that have to be made. So there's a lot of bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy adds dramatically to the cost of building a network. And it also creates significant delays. And this is one of the key reasons why it's very difficult for us today to say how long it will take and how much it would cost for the town to build a fiber optic network. Once we know whether the governor's plan or this provision of the governor's plan, One Touch Make Ready, is actually wins approval, that would be a major benefit for any town that wanted to wire its own area, or if Comcast or another provider wanted to wire, string new wires in its area. So I mention all of that because it's not certain exactly when that bill will come up for a vote, but I will definitely send an email around to all of you who are interested. And it would be really good to contact State Representative Horn and State Senator Minor to tell them that you really support that provision. So finally, the Federal Communications Commission is planning to launch something called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, which is a $50 a month for the next 6 months that it would pay to help eligible households cover their monthly internet service costs. How you apply and who actually can qualify is a little complicated. And in fact, the FCC hasn't actually released all the details yet, but stay tuned on our Facebook page and our website, because once it is up and running, our task force would like to help any Sharon residents who want to apply for that program. Okay, so that's a lot of things on a lot of fronts. But I just wanted to kind of give you an overview. Why don't I turn to Brent now? Brent Colley, if you want to say a few words, and then we can, we're open to any and all questions. So Brent is actually having to call in on his phone. So
no, I'm here. I just unmuted myself.
Great.
Can you hear?
You're great, Brent.
Yep. All right, cool. Yeah, no, Jill mapped it out perfectly. You know, everything that she said is what's currently in play. And I want to give thanks to her and Megan, the task force, for allowing us to be here, because we're in a better position than pretty much any other town locally because of the work that they did and the connections that we've made. To use a basketball term, we've basically put a full court press on everyone who could possibly provide broadband and cell service to our town. And that's been a big benefit, because there were a number of years where we didn't have any help from anyone, and we'd reach out and we wouldn't hear back from them. It was crickets, really. But now it's a totally different environment. We see engineers, boots on the ground, if you will, looking at neighborhoods and actually planning how they're possibly going to help us to build out the areas that we need built out or better through the surveys and the help of the task force. Individuals in town that reached out for help have received the help that they needed, which is something as simple in some places as new modems, or maybe a little bit of an upgrade in wiring in their house or their business. We did that at Town Hall. It's made an impact. And just goes to show that when people pull together, good things happen. So, I mean, on this call, Jill mapped out everything that's going on. I mean, from the local providers to, you know, federal level funding, state broadband changes in legislation, to, you know, satellites. We're exploring everything. So, you know, on this call, just let us know what you're interested in, or maybe something that you're concerned about, or maybe bring up a point that maybe we haven't explored yet. But as a group, and as you know, I can't tell exactly how many people are on the call, but I know a lot of people signed up for it. it goes to show that, we all need this in some way, shape, or form, because things have changed so much in just a short period of time, whether it be working from home or your students at home, or even just like your appliances now are smarter than they've ever been. So it's something that, I'm happy to have the help to try to fix, because, that's really what makes, communities better, is people pulling together. And that's kind of what's happened here. And so we want to help you, but we want to know the concerns and maybe some problem areas that we're not aware of. Like Jill said, we've had some really great conversations with Congresswoman Hayes' office. They've been a big help. The state office has been a big help. I know that there was a big meeting yesterday with Pura, and some of you may have talked to Bert Cohen, who helps us with broadband and other consumer concerns. And so things are happening, and it's an exciting time to be here and to basically be ready when we have the opportunity. And I think the opportunities are within our reach, within maybe even a couple months. That's how close we are. So I want to thank everyone involved and everyone on this call. And if you reach out to me for a question, just say my name, Brent. I have a question, because I'm on a phone right now up at Sheffield, Massachusetts, and so I'll answer you that way, because I can't see who's on the call.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Brent. All right. Well, that's a lot of information to absorb, but I'm eager to hear anybody's questions, comments, suggestions. And you have to unmute yourself if you want. I don't see hands raised. Let's see.
Jill, I don't have anything in the chat either, but I just wanted to point out that I did send the link more about that broadband benefit into the chat. And if there's anything that Jill mentioned that you would like more information on, a lot of that comes through in our newsletter, but I can dig out some links for you and share them in the chat, or we can certainly follow up afterward with you individually or as a group. If there's some information that you want to follow up with, we can forward that along.
Yeah, Harding.
Hi, Jill. I have a question. I read before, I think during the summer, that other towns are going through the same process. I think Falls Village is, or somewhere up there. And some have commissioned engineering studies. I'm just wondering, are we learning anything from them, or are we collaborating with them? If, what's the story there?
Yeah. Thank you. It's a really good question. Yes. So there is this umbrella group that was started about 5 years ago called Northwest Connect. And that is an umbrella that works with the Northwest Hills Council of Governments. And they have been trying to advocate for high-speed internet across, everywhere from Torrington down to Litchfield, up to North Canaan. So they created kind of a regional approach to and did a really great study in 2018, which we have relied on, where they looked at all of the billing data that every household in the area had to find out what kind of internet service people had. They went pretty much as far as they can go, and they're still an incredibly active group, but it became very apparent that to move any further, each town would have to figure out what it wanted to do and what it was willing to pay, because the money to build anything would have to come through each individual town. There's not a county or a regional mechanism to pay for this. So Northwest Connect has gotten grants that helped really helped them fund that really sort of baseline study that everybody was working off of about, what is the actual connection situation, or what it was, at least at the end of 2018. They have also got some money, I think, in the last year, and they funded a engineering study for the city of Torrington. And we're still waiting for that engineering plan to, it's really more of a study, waiting for that to be released, but we are going to watch that. Other towns, Cornwall has a very active internet task force, and we are in touch with them and we share information. The same thing with Litchfield. The town of Norfolk also has a very, very active person in the name of Kim Maxwell, who was one of the co-founders of Northwest Connect. And he did an amazing business plan that all of us have looked at and are looking at the possibilities of, for a all fiber optic to the home, every single home in Norfolk. And so he's kind of laid it all out, and I think the town is sort of digesting that. The next step for them, like us, would be to do an engineering plan. I think, like Brent was saying, we're a little bit, I think, ahead of them right now. I'm not sure that funding is in their next year's budget, but they're working on that. So we have a lot of meetings. I guess we probably meet like once every 6 weeks with everybody, with the people who choose to meet on Northwest Connect, to kind of hear what's happening elsewhere in the region. We had participated with them. They wanted to do a mapping project. And if you look on our website, you can see where you can map the speed of your internet. And then that all goes through Northwest Connect to a way to show who really does and doesn't have high-speed internet here, which I can talk a little more bit about that. One of the things that's interesting is that some of the towns in our region are served by Optimum Altice, or Altice Optimum, and others are served by Comcast when it comes to cable. And say Litchfield and Cornwall, who we've been in very close contact with, those are both served by Optimum, not Comcast. And Optimum, just in the last 6 weeks, has announced that it's going to wire all of the areas that it serves with fiber optic line to the home. Now, Comcast hasn't done anything like that. They haven't said anything like that. My understanding is, and our understanding, and Megan can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that Comcast is not planning a fiber to the home network for Sharon at all. And there are areas of Sharon, like in Ellsworth and down along the Housatonic, along River Road, and other areas that don't even have any option to have cable internet because Comcast hasn't wired their roads. And the town, Brent and his predecessors as first selectmen, have been pleading for 15 years for Comcast to finish building out the rest of Sharon. And for reasons you don't even want to know, there was deregulation in 2007. And so the companies no longer have to provide universal service. They don't have to build out if they don't want to. And because we are so rural and so spread out, and it's difficult to wire some of these houses in Sharon, Comcast it doesn't make business sense for them to do it. So that's a very long answer to your question, that yes, we are in contact with many other towns. In fact, we are going to have a meeting next month with a bunch of towns in New York State, because Millerton, Ancram, Menia, a lot of them have broadband committees as well. And I'm really curious about what they're doing. They have some state funding that we don't have, but we're very curious about what's been working for them and what might be working for us. And I think all of us want to figure out the best possible way to look attractive and be ready for federal funding as it comes online.
So, Jill, we do have two hands up. One of them was Robert and one was John. I did not see the order they came in, and I'd like to, Robert, just for a second, let John speak because he may have something to add to the Northwest Connect piece that Jill had. If you don't mind, is that okay? And then we'll let you go.
He was first.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for being honest. John, are you still with us? Do you want to, John Brett, did you want to speak? You're muted, John, if you're.
I was, no, actually, I raised my hand by accident. I apologize.
No worries, no worries, Robert.
That's why I was first.
You're so excited.
Robert, we'll let you go. And then Deborah Torres would like to ask a question.
Hi, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, my first question has to do with the engineering report that you're looking for. Engineering report, it sounds like it would be something wonderful, but what does that really mean to have an engineering report? And why does it cost $30,000 to the town?
Yeah, right. So let me just say that engineering plan, that 30,000 is really just a first tier. So one of the things that they do is it's kind of like doing a site plan for if you're going to build a new house, right? You have to look at where are the lines now? What would I have to do to actually physically wire from wherever my hut is, right? Okay, so one of the first things they have to do is they have to look at the whole topography of the town as an engineer. I mean, they are engineers. And they have to find out where to put the electronics and if we need more than one, what's called a hut. Those huts can be anywhere between, and well, how much they cost doesn't matter in terms of the cost of the engineering. But anyway, they first have to locate where those would be. We probably only need one for Sharon. Then they have to decide how they would run the lines the most efficiently and cost effectively, whether we would do it for only town and state roads, or whether we would want as a town to do what's called fiber to the premise. So what would it take? How much would it cost and how much fiber would it take and what would be the engineering needed to basically have fiber on a utility pole right next to every single home and business in Sharon? And then what would it take to take that wire and get it into the house for people who want to subscribe to the service? So they need to do all of that. They have to look as an engineer at every single pole to see whether and how it can take another bit of wire. And if it can't, they have to order a new pole, and then a new pole has to get placed in. They have to figure out the distance. A huge variable in the cost. And one of the reasons why Sharon is so difficult and our small towns are so difficult to wire is knowing the difference between whether the utility services are underground or if they're aerial. And if they're underground, is there an open conduit that you could run the fiber optic line through to get from whatever the closest pole is to wherever you want that to go? And if not, how much would it cost to dig the trench that far? So the first blush that we're trying to do is to just get a kind of lay of the land. If we wanted to do 3 tiers, if we wanted to see how much it would cost to wire to allow access from every single home and business, 2, whether you're on a private road, a mile-long driveway, or you're like me, you're like 40 feet from the road, from a town road. So that would be number 1. Number 2 would be doing the town and state roads and the private roads, but not doing it all the way to the house. And if we did something like that, one of the things the task force is talking about is we have a wonderful person on the task force who's very financially cognizant, and other people who are willing to help. What kind of financing could we organize for people in town if they wanted to try to find a way to finance it from the nearest pole to their house? And then the last one would be, we just do what's called the trunk wiring around the town and state-owned roads. And then everything that builds out from there would have to be privately financed. So we want to give the town those 3 levels of cost. And before a shovel could go into the ground, we would need a much deeper engineering plan than what I've just described. But this will be what we can do for this amount of money. My understanding, we've had informal, like I said, they haven't been formal conversations because we haven't physically put anything out for bid. But we want to understand what is the information that they would need to be able to do the actual
So
engineering.
would it be fair to say that it's essentially a feasibility study?
Well, it's a little more than that, because I think they will be able to give us something that, while it's not ready to build, it is an actual plan. It's like in between. It's not like the construction plans for a house, but it's also not as vague as, is it possible to do this? It would be, how much would this cost? With a pretty reasonable certainty. And I guess just the other thing I would say is that we have people on the task force who are right now using all the public databases they can to try to get as much information together as possible that we can give the engineers so that they can really do their work.
Thank you.
So anyway, does that help you answer? Is that?
Yes, that's very, very informative. Thank you.
Okay, Deborah.
Hi.
And then Sherry.
Okay.
Sherry, can you hold on? It's Deborah. Deborah needs to go next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She had her hand up. Okay.
I just wanted to ask a few more questions about the possible state legislation.
Mm-hmm.
If that were to pass, Comcast would be required to build out all of this stuff that would give us access without the town having to pay anything and without us personally having to pay anything other than the service itself and possibly wiring from the street to our homes.
Right.
So I guess my question is, how likely is that from a, do people think that it is for that to pass? And if it were to pass, and you may not know the answer, how long would it take before it actually happened?
Right. So I'm trying to stay in touch with people who can read Hartford better than I can. All I know is that the governor is not backing down on that. But as you could imagine, the cable companies have a lot of money and they have a lot of lobbyists. Several of the people in Sharon, 26 people in Sharon, wrote letters, provided testimony for the public hearing that was on this bill when it was in the Energy and Technology Committee. And I was on that whole call, and the cable companies have very, very effective lawyers who are against pretty much every provision of this bill. And they start from the provision that the state doesn't have any right to regulate them at all, and then go down. So I can't put my finger in the air and count votes in that way. But one of the things that the governor had asked for in that legislation was that not only would incumbent providers need to basically provide access throughout their whole franchise area, but they would have to do it at a rate where people could get 1 gigabit service download and 1 gigabit service upload, which is what you can do with fiber optic because of the technology, but you can't really do that with coaxial cable. So we were wondering, so if now what I understand is that the governor is not, there may not be sufficient legal, he may not have, the states may not have the right to dictate what the speeds need to be. So if the state can't dictate what the speeds are, then for Comcast, this becomes much less expensive. Because if Comcast, if the bill passed and Comcast were forced to wire all of Sharon with fiber optic, that is a lot of money. But if all it has to do is build out the roads, the town and state roads, because it wouldn't cover private roads, town and state roads that it hasn't built out, that's a much smaller amount of money, but it is amount of money that Comcast has never been willing to pay, right? So, so if the legislation passes, it will be very, we don't know how long they will have to build this before they get fined or whatever the issues are in the bill. And I would guess that two things. One, Comcast could file a lawsuit to say this, this is an illegal mandate, and that could drag on in the courts for years. Or two, they would be willing to do it. And then the question would be, would they be building out the areas that have higher density than Sharon first? If I were a businessman, I would do that. I would put Sharon at the end of the line because we have 60 square miles and only about 3,000 people. And so it becomes a little problematic. Now, because of Megan, we have been, and Brent, we have been in really, really close contact with Comcast over the last year. So maybe they would take pity on us and they would wire us a little earlier in the list if they had to. But anyway, part of our strategy is also that we have found that over the last 15 years, our town has tried very hard with very good human cases to say, please, Comcast, would you wire the rest of our town? And they have just ignored us and said no. So we're at this point in this cycle, especially with the federal funding that is becoming available. Rural broadband is one of the big buzzwords now. To tell Comcast, look, you're not going to do it. We're going to do it ourselves. And you're going to now have a competitor. And do you really want that? So that's where we're out. But do know that this legislative session should end at the beginning of June. So we'll know pretty quickly whether the governor's bill is going to pass and in what form.
And let me just add to the timing piece for that too, Jill. One of the other elements, Deborah, you had asked about how long it would take, and Jill just expressed that Comcast could likely drag their feet. We do have a very good relationship with Comcast right now. Brent and I have I think one of the best probably ever seen. But one of the biggest key pieces to this, besides their hesitancy or their lackluster response to wanting to wire us, is One Touch Make Ready. And that stops really everything in its tracks. I have been helping a woman from Norfolk get Comcast service, and her issue has been over 4 months of holding pattern with Frontier and Eversource to approve the licensing. And it's the simplest thing, but it's the most ridiculous setup for them to approve. So the One Touch Make Ready does really, really change things for all of this. Claudia has a question in the chat. So Claudia, I'll respond to that while Sherry is going, if that's okay with everyone, unless you, are you good, Deborah? Did we answer you?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great. So we'll go Sherry, and then Ruth has raised her hand, and Claudia, I will answer you in the chat.
Sherry, go ahead.
Well, I thought I unmuted.
You're good. No, we can hear
Okay. No, I have what probably seems like a stupid question. Is there anything in this package that addresses the lack of cell phone service?
No. Now,
I would say
that.
yes. I would say,
Pardon?
Brent, so this is Brent. So I'd say yes and no. You can't have one without the other. So fiber would give you cell service, but we'd have to coordinate with other cell providers because of that. But with fiber, it opens up so many opportunities for so many other pieces of technology.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yeah. So Sherry, as part of our task force, we kind of decided that we needed to focus first on the high-speed internet, like Brent was saying, and to really look at what would a fiber optic network cost, what could it give
Right,
us?
right.
And then once we get that, then we will stay together as a group to try to improve self-service, because yeah, there's a lot of places where, we have
I
dead
have
zones, and
cable,
those
I have-
are dangerous and all of that. But that's a more actually much more controversial fix, because a lot of people don't like big cell towers, and they don't like little transponders either. So that's a harder lift, but it's much
I mean,
needed.
I'm on a main road and I have absolutely no cell service at my house. None. I have cable, I have Comcast cable, but I have no cell service.
Right. Have you talked to Megan about getting
I
a
was
cell
gonna
phone
say-
booster on your chimney?
Sherry, we might be able to help. It kind of
I'm going to
depends.
talk to you because I've had so many fights with AT&T. You have no idea.
Let's have a quick chat and see if we can't figure something out as a workaround, at least for now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And then I forgot who else had their hand up.
Ruth?
It was me, Ruth. Hi,
Oh, hi, Ruth.
everybody. And I just want to thank the task force for all the great work you've been doing. I'm extremely grateful. I have no cell service either, by the way, but I finally broke down and got a landline. Anyway, I came in late to the call, so maybe I missed this and you already discussed it. Forgive me, but I'm wondering what the prospect is of, these proposals that were aired in the president's speech last night. Included a lot of discussion of, although rather vague, about rural broadband. Do we have any hope of benefiting from that if it happens?
Yeah, well, if it happens, well, let me say, Representative Hayes, our Congresswoman, is on this, and she knows pretty intimately about our issues, because Brent filed a request for a $60,000 earmark to help us with this stage of the broadband engineering plan. And so she's got all the data about what the number of people in Sharon who are underserved and those who are unserved, and all of that, all of those kind of qualifiers that will be important when if any of that legislation does pass. So she's on the lookout for us. Then there's also several different kind of industry groups that are trying to help. Like I'm going to be on a call tomorrow with a sort of consulting firm. It's supposed to be for free. It will be for free because we're not paying anything, but to sort of talk about the best ways to write your applications for these federal grants. And there is a woman who is not part of our task force, but she's an amazing woman named Rosemary O'Brien, who did a lot of the basic work for Northwest Connect's landmark study of what we've got here in the Northwest corner in terms of connectivity. And she is an expert in federal grant writing, and she's helping us, pro bono, because she's a wonderful woman who cares about rural broadband. So she's going to also help us kind of navigate that federal landscape. So we are, like Brent was saying before, like we are ready to go. Like we've got the pedal to the metal. If there is money, we're going to go for it, and we're going to do our best to qualify and be as on top of it and as sophisticated as we need to be to make sure we check all the boxes, so that if there's any money that's coming to Connecticut, it's coming to us.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great. And Robert, we see your hand again. And you're muted.
Yes, I should also say that I'm covering this for the Lakeville Journal, so some of these questions are so that we can have a report on it in the local newspaper, which I hope you all subscribe to and read diligently, because it is a wonderful lifeline for all of us. But two closely related questions. One is, to what extent have you engaged the potential companies that would be actually managing the system on a day-to-day basis to find out what's the nature of your engagement with them at this point?
Yes, it's a good question. So we have had what I would call preliminary and informal conversations with a few firms, and have listened in on, or different webinars that different firms have. And we are not, we're not at a place yet where we're actually hiring a firm to do anything. We're just learning. And one of the key points that we have been watching for and talking to them about is something called take rate. So if the town were to build its own network, there would be two sets of costs for that. One would be the cost to initially build it. And that would be likely paid for by whatever the town portion of that would likely be paid for by a long-term bonding. And these assets, these fiber optic assets, are really long life. So the town would likely do a 40-year bond offering on that. So it's kind of similar like a bond offering the town would do to pave roads. Then for the service itself, that is generally paid for kind of like sewer and water by the people who subscribe to the service. So how much the service would cost every month would depend on who subscribes, how many people subscribe. And we have looked at other towns in Massachusetts, like Western Massachusetts. We're in touch with several towns there that have done this. Towns that have a competing cable provider tend to get an initial take rate of something like only 20 or 30%. Because what happens is when the town builds out their network, the cable company drops their price to compete. And you're competing against a multi-billion-dollar company. But what you have to do is provide a better service and all that. So we've talked to a couple of companies that have done that in Western Massachusetts, and how, so a key thing for us, if the town, it's kind of like something that's sort of out there in the future. Like what we've mostly concentrated on is what would it take to build something? And because there's a lot of work that would be involved in that. And then in terms of who would manage it and how much it would cost, we're having really informal conversations.
I think my question,
let me just say one more thing, Robert. The companies in Western Massachusetts, this would be a really good, we would love other towns in Northwest Connecticut to also have their own network, because if there's ever an issue and a truck has to roll, a repair truck has to roll to deal with it, they would probably be coming, from, an hour away. And if, let's say, 4 towns in Northwest Connecticut all had their own, all had their service, then we were all using the same person, then there would be really great economies of scale there.
Yeah, I think the question I would really meant to ask had to do with, are they interested?
Yes.
Is there an active level of interest, enough interest on the part of these companies, given the size of the market being small?
Yes. And it's a very good question. Yes, because they see the writing on the wall. They see that the future is requiring that we have more and more bandwidth. Today the FCC qualifies high-speed internet as something like 25 megabits download speed or something. And there are lots of applications that is just not sufficient for. So these companies see a market in rural broadband. And there's also a lot of private equity money that's now coming into this sector, because they understand that this is something that the federal government is going to be funding. And there's just going to be a lot of money coming to areas like ours, hopefully like ours. So let me just say that maybe it's almost like, from the private equity standpoint, I guess it's kind of like the flavor of the moment. There's an opportunity here. They see an opportunity here. And there are there's a company called Certex. There's a company called Fiber Connect. There are other companies that we've been talking to that are very interested in talking to us, and they've been doing this in small communities, either in our area or across the country.
Great. Kathleen's got her hand raised. Kathleen, you are muted. You might want to unmute.
I just want to say that you're not getting a lot of questions because you've been so thorough in your speech. It's been fabulous, and it's really quite wonderful. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
I talk a lot. Oh yeah. Okay.
You tell us what we need to hear. So it's been great.
Great. Well, it's all, you know, because
Thank
I'm
you.
learning all the time too, and I want to know. I'm a taxpayer in Sharon. You know, I want to know what value would we get from all this? Why are we doing this? And I think the reason that all of us are involved in this is because, you know, we want everybody in town to have this kind of access. And what is it? You know, why does it take all this effort? Why, you know, can't we make this happen? So, and we just want to be very practical about it too.
Thank you.
Nat, I see your hand raised.
Yep.
You want me?
Yeah.
I thank you again. I wanted to reiterate that this has been a very well modulated discussion. You said you were going to introduce the members of the task force. Is that possible? Since unfortunately I have to leave shortly.
Thank you for asking, right? Because here we are at 6:57. We want to get off by 7. So I'm just going to look at my list so I don't forget anybody. So there is John Brett, who is, oh, there he is in the person. He's unmasked himself. Thank you, John. Paul DiPaolo, who I don't know is on the call. Patrick Galloway, who is terrific finance guy. Roger Laurie there. Yeah. Linda Nyberg, who has been terrific. Alexandra Peters was here. You may have to have dropped off. Barbara Prindle, Brent Prindle, Beth Ribzik, and Eric Simon, who's there. So that's who's on the task force.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody have anything else? Megan, do you want to say anything else here? What have I missed?
Oh, no, I think I would say that you did an awesome job as usual, Jill. I have been throwing some stuff in the chat. So if anybody is not able to see the chat, I will save this. I shared my email, just letting, you know, for you, Sherry, my email's in the chat. So be sure to grab that and send me a note. And anybody else, I have been trying, you know, as best I can to get anyone who is currently using Frontier or Comcast services to, if there's issues with those services. Frontier is responsive in that they answer me, and that's about all they do, but I am trying to light fires, and I don't quit. So I've been after them for a while. Comcast is not only responsive, but they, from my understanding, they have been correcting a lot of issues when I ask them to. So if you're currently a Frontier or Comcast user having some trouble, feel free to send me a note. If you are not able to get, you know, either one of those options, and you're using either a hotspot or your cell phone hotspot, or you're using HughesNet and you want to look at other options for internet, Jill did mention the Starlink is coming out, but there's other little hotspot workarounds that I've been doing all summer with a lot of the students at Sharon Center School. And so there's some help with that. And then there's some ideas for boosting cell service as well. So I will disclaimer, a lot of it is not very cheap, but there's probably ways that we can finagle some things and get some credits and try to help with those, you know, sort of workarounds for cell service and for additional internet service. But if you're really limping along and you are desperate for something, feel free to give me a call. We can at least try to explore it. And then Claudia had just been asking about Frontier and about whether or not this bill proposed by Governor Lamont's office would limit Frontier, if Frontier lines were carried, does Comcast have to also service those lines? And I told her that yes, it is for the cable companies to fill that in. So, so it is in the chat. If anybody's missing it, you know, just again, send me a quick note. I just put a link to the task force members on our website. So you can take a look at our website where we do a lot of updates. But if you want to reach out to any one of us, I think most of us have our emails actually embedded in there. So you can reach out to us that way. We can be reached if you need to get in touch. But otherwise, I didn't really have anything else to add. That was great.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being on the call. And oh, Robert, do you have anything else you want to say before we sign off?
That was just the clapping hands applause.
Oh,
thank you.
thank you. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. All right.
Bye.
Really good job.